Sometimes all that exists is a suspended moment. The wind stops for a second. The light touches the surface of the water, and without warning, something inside of you awaken. It is not thought. It's not clear emotion. It's an old feeling, like if the world was trying to remember who you are. Have you ever felt this? That moment in that the invisible seems more real than anything that can be named. There are paths that do not appear on maps. They are not made of earth or stone, but pay attention. They arise when the noise of the world diminishes and the heart learns to listen without demanding answers. In those moments, life stops being a race and becomes a date. A silent encounter between you and something that has always been there, even when you didn't realize it. Observe nature for a moment. Nothing about it asks for permission to exist. The tree does not hurry up. The river doesn't argue with the stones. The mountain does not try to prove its greatness. Everything simply fulfills its role, in harmony with forces that do not need to be views to be real. And yet human beings insist on believing that they are separated from it all, as if he were a visitor in a world that, in fact, has always been your home. Maybe the tiredness you feel doesn't just come from daily responsibilities, maybe come from the distance of oblivion, to live as if everything depended solely on effort, strength, control, when, deep down, life has always responded better to respect, listening, and alignment with what flows naturally. There is a discreet presence following your every step. She doesn't interfere, doesn't judge, does not require. Just watch, hold, and hope you slow down enough to understand it. Some would call this luck, others of destiny. But in direct experience, this reveals itself as a silent support, as natural as the breathing that takes place without being ordered. If you feel like there is something invisible guiding your days, even when everything seems confused, this path is for you. Stay here. Let this video be a space of respite, like cool shade beneath an ancient tree. Perhaps by listening carefully, you remember something that was never lost, just forgotten for a while. There is a call that does not use voice. It does not arrive as a clear thought or a rational decision. It appears as a gentle restlessness, a discreet discomfort that appears even when everything seems be fine. It's as if something inside you knows there is more, not more things, no more achievements, but more depth, more alignment, more true. This call does not force. He waits. It can manifest itself in simple moments. When you watch the sky for too long, when you feel like being silent without reason, when you realize that certain routines no longer nourish who you are. It's not about reject the world, but recognize that something essential has been stifled by excessive noise. Nature understands this call instinctively. When the season changes, the leaves don't resist. When the rain comes, the earth opens up. Everything responds to invisible signals, without conflict, without a doubt. There is a quiet trust in the flow of life. The human being, however, learned to distrust these signs. You have learned to ignore what you cannot measure, prove, or explain. Still, the call persists. He adapts. If it is not heard as a whisper, turns into tiredness. If you continue to ignore it, it becomes anxiety, not as punishment, but as a reminder that living disconnected from the natural rhythm takes a toll interior, and the more we try to silence that warning, the more it finds new ways to speak, manifest. Maybe you've felt this when you wake up and don't know exactly what's wrong. Oh, when achieving something you wanted, and even so, feeling an unexpected emptiness. This is not failure. It's sensitivity. It is the perception that life is not limited to the visible, and that something essential cannot be replaced by constant movement or distractions. There are forces that don't push, they attract. They do not order sudden changes, just invite small adjustments. One step slower, a closer look, a respect greater at its own pace. When you begin to respond to that calling, even if timidly, something reorganizes itself inside. The tension decreases, perception expands. A life stops looking like a battlefield and starts to reveal itself as a path. This path is not new. He was always under your feet, but it only shows when you stop running. It doesn't require you to abandon everything just to listen again. Listening is the first gesture of harmony, and harmonizing is allowing the invisible to walk alongside you, side, instead of resisting it. If this idea resonates with you, It is a sign that something inside has already begun to awaken. No speed up this process. Just like nature, he knows exactly when to move forward. Just keep walking, with less noise, more presence, and a sense of confidence. Silent that you are not lost. Nature never explains. It shows. Your language is not made of words but of movements, cycles, and pauses. The river does not. He teaches through speeches, but by going around stones. The light does not announce its arrival. He just plays everything he finds. There is deep wisdom in this silent way of communicate, a wisdom that does not convince, only reveals. When we observe carefully, we realize that everything in nature responds to something invisible. The tides obey forces that we cannot see. The seeds taste exactly when it breaks the earth. Birds migrate guided by something that cannot be drawn on maps. None of this is random. There is a living order sustaining every detail, even when chaos seems to dominate the surface. Human beings, however, have unlearned how to listen to this language, got used to trusting only in what can be said, written, or calculated, and in doing so, he lost intimacy with the subtle signs. The body speaks, but is ignored. Intuition points, but is questioned. Silence offers answers, but is quickly filled with noise. Still, the language of nature remains available. It manifests itself in tiredness that asks for rest, in the discomfort that signals misalignment, in the calm that arises when you're in a place that feels familiar without knowing why. These are not accidents. They are messages, invitations to return to the rhythm that sustains life. Observe how water teaches without imposing. When she encounters resistance, she does not insist with brute force. She waits, bypasses, infiltrates. Over time, it transforms what seemed immutable. This gentleness is not weakness. It is aligned persistence. The water is in no hurry, because trust time. And time, when respected, works in favor of harmony. Trees also know this language. They don't all grow the same nor compete for attention. Each one occupies its own space, absorbing light, wind, and rain according to its own form. When one falls, it makes room for others. Nothing is wasted. Everything transforms. Death is not an abrupt end, but part of the cycle that sustains continuity. This same language communicates with you, every day, not through orders clear, but of sensations. A tightness in the chest when something is not aligned. A lightness unexpected when you make a choice consistent with who you are. The problem is not the absence of signals, it's a lack of listening. Learning the language of nature does not require isolation or abandonment of everyday life. It requires presence, a less hurried look, a willingness to feel before interpret. When you start listening this way, something changes. Decisions become less heavy, the path appears more clearly, and the invisible ceases to seem distant because it becomes recognized as a constant part of the experience. Nature has never separated itself from you. It was only his attention that drifted away. And all reconnection begins the moment you stop, observe, and allow silence to say something that words will never be able to explain. At some point along the way, the human being began to walk faster than his own perception. The days started to be filled with urgencies, goals, notifications, and expectations that they rarely cease. The body follows, but attention is fragmented. And little by little, the feeling of belonging to the natural flow of life is being replaced by a permanent feeling of delay, as if there was always something that should be being done. This constant rush was not born by chance. It arises when we move away from the rhythm natural and we try to impose an artificial rhythm on existence. The problem is not acting, produce, or build. The problem is acting without listening, produce without pause, build without alignment. When this happens, the effort increases but the meaning decreases. Modern anxiety is not just fear of the future. It is often a sign of mismatch with the present. The mind races ahead, trying to anticipate risks, control results, and ensure safety. But life doesn't respond well to excessive control. She closes. It becomes heavy. What should flow starts to require force. Observe how this manifests itself in everyday life. People tired even after resting. Decisions made more out of fear of making mistakes than out of clarity. Relationships maintained by habit, not presence. All of this points to a subtle but profound separation. of what sustains life in a balanced way. In nature, this type of chronic exhaustion does not exist. Rest is not guilt. The break, it's not waste. The night does not compete with the day. Each phase fulfills its function. Oh, the problem is that human beings always try to live at the height of the day, ignoring that regeneration happens in the dark, in silence and stillness. When this balance is broken, the body begins to speak. Sleep becomes unstable, a breathing shortens, the pleasure is diluted, and yet many insist on continuing, believing that the solution lies in doing more, thinking more, running faster. But the disconnection cannot be resolved with acceleration. She asks for feedback. Maybe you realize this state in yourself. The feeling of being busy but not fully alive, of completing tasks, but feeling like something essential is being left behind. If this realization arises now, don't ignore it. It is not weakness. It is lucidity. It's the moment when something inside begins to ask for another type of relationship with life. If this reflection touches you, allow yourself to remain on this path. Not as someone who seeks immediate responses, but like someone starting to remember their own rhythm. When this memory awakens, even in a subtle way, something reorganizes inside. And this is already a return signal. The disconnection didn't happen overnight, and the reunion doesn't happen either abruptly. It starts with simple gestures, listening to the body, respecting tiredness. Slow down when everything calls for hurry. They are silent choices that do not attract attention, but they profoundly change the experience of being alive. Life does not require you to fight it. She asks for partnership. When you stop resisting and begins to listen, the weight decreases. The path smooths out, and what seemed confusing before begins, little by little, to find its natural place. Every reconnection begins with a simple gesture. Stop. Not to stop the world, but to stop internal resistance. When you stop fighting the rhythm of life, something settles naturally. It is like murky water that, when left in rest, allows impurities to descend on their own. Clarity does not come from strength, but from stillness. Purification is not a dramatic act. It does not require complex rituals or sudden breaks. It happens when you remove the excess of noise, of expectation, of charges that were not born of you. Every time you choose silence over reaction automatic, something cleans inside. Every time you respect your limits, something realigns. In nature, purification is constant. The rain washes the air. The wind renews the space. The rivers, they carry what no longer needs to remain. Nothing clings indefinitely to what already completed its cycle. Human beings, however, learn to accumulate undigested emotions, repeated thoughts, old fears. And this accumulation weighs heavily, even when it is not consciously perceived. Returning to center is remembering that you are not this accumulation. You are the space where everything it passes. When this realization dawns, even briefly, there is immediate relief. A breathing deepens. The body relaxes. The mind slows down. No because the problems disappeared, but because you stopped being confused with them. This return does not happen outside. It does not depend on perfect circumstances. It happens in the middle of ordinary life, when you allow yourself to be complete in what you do, when walking without hurry, when observing light passing through a window, by listening to your own breathing. These moments are not small. They are silent portals. Purification also involves accepting what is, not in the sense of giving up, but of recognition. When you accept the gift as it comes, without labeling it immediately as error or failure, open space for transformation to occur without conflict. Resistance hardens, acceptance softens, and what is smooth finds paths that rigidity would never find. There is profound wisdom in letting go of expectations that are not met, letting go of identities that no longer serve you. Allow certain phases to end. This is not loss, it's preparation. Just as the tree sheds its leaves to preserve life, you also need to release what no longer supports your growth. When you return to the center, you realize that you were never truly far away. What changed was the attention. The center was always available, waiting for you to return, inhabit it. And as you do so, a feeling of inner cleansing arises. as if something old was finally washed away by the silent current of life. This state is not permanent, nor does it need to be. He is a reminder, a point of reference. Whenever the world seems too heavy, you can return. Don't stop escape from life, but to rediscover the most natural way of walking through it, with less burden, more presence, and a serenity that does not depend on circumstances. When you slow down enough, you start to realize you've never walked alone. There's a discreet presence following your steps, not like someone leading you to strength, but as something that supports the path from below. She doesn't point out clear directions, nor does it offer guarantees. Just keeps the ground firm enough to keep you going, advancing. Walking with the invisible does not mean abandoning choices or responsibilities. It means trust that there is a greater order operating even when you don't understand the details. Just as the body knows how to heal without conscious instructions, so does life. Finds ways to reorganize. When you stop interfering excessively, this silent company is revealed in the small alignments. An unexpected encounter that changes the course of a day. A decision made without apparent logic, but which later show coherent. A delay that prevents something bigger. These moments go unnoticed when the mind is too busy trying to predict everything, but when observed with attention, form a subtle pattern of care. In nature, nothing walks in isolation. The roots communicate underground. The winds carry seeds over long distances. Rivers are fed by tributaries invisible to the surface. There is a silent interdependence underpinning each movement. The human beings are part of this same tissue, although they often forget this. Trusting the invisible is not passivity. It's sensitivity. It's about acting when it's time to act and retreat when the movement calls for waiting. It is recognizing that not every answer needs to be immediate. Some reveal themselves only after the step has been taken. Others arise when you stop insisting. This kind of confidence transforms the way you face the unknown. The fear decreases, not because the risk has disappeared, but because the relationship with uncertainty changes. And instead of fighting it, you learn to walk along with it. Uncertainty ceases to be a threat and becomes a space of possibility. There is a serenity that comes from this posture, a tranquility that does not depend on control, but alignment. When you act in tune with this invisible flow, the effort becomes lighter. Choices no longer seem like internal battles. The way, even though it is challenging, it becomes coherent. Walking with the invisible also requires humility. Accept that not everything will be understood, that some answers will never come in the form of words, how certain events do not require explanation, only presence. This acceptance does not weaken, it enlarges. It makes room for an intelligence broader than thought. Over time, you realize that this presence is not outside. She neither arrives nor goes, though. It has always been integrated into the very experience of being alive. What changes is your willingness to recognize it. And this recognition transforms the way you move in the world. When you walk like this, something deeply quiets. Not because life has become predictable, but because you stopped walking against it. And in this alignment silent, each step begins to carry less fear and more confidence, as if the own path was finally walking with you. When everything quiets down, something remains, not as a definitive answer, but as an ongoing presence. After going through this path of listening, silence, and return, you can realize that nothing essential had to be conquered. Everything was already there. What changed was the way of looking, feeling, walk. Life does not require you to have all the certainties. She only asks for availability. Availability to feel before judging, to pause before reacting, to recognize that there are forces at work even when you don't see them. When this opening happens, the world stops seeming hostile and starts to reveal itself as a space of cooperation, silent. Perhaps the challenges will continue, maybe the doubts too. But now there is something different, an internal axis, a return point. Whenever the noise increases, you'll know you can return to the center. Whenever fear arises, you will remember that you do not walk alone. This remembrance does not eliminate the complexity of life, but it offers the ground to cross it. None of this needs to be maintained with effort. Just as nature does not force its cycles, this harmony is also not sustained by tension. It manifests itself when you allows, when you stop hardening in the face of what changes, when you accept that the invisible does not, it needs to be explained to be real. Following this path does not mean moving away from the world, but inhabiting it in a different way, with more respect for your own rhythm, with more sensitivity to subtle signals, with less need for control and more confidence in the flow that sustains each step. If this journey touched something inside you, allow it to continue. Subscribe to the channel and continue walking with us through this space of silence, nature, and presence. Here, know we look for ready answers. We cultivate listening. And before you leave, take this question with you, without rushing to answer it. What if what you call destiny is just the constant whisper of forces, invisible people who have always walked by your side, waiting for the moment when you were ready to listen?